The history of this Mitsubishi is quite particular. We could say that it had everything to succeed and be one of the best. However, this simply did not happen. The Mitsubishi 3000 GT or Mitsubishi GTO is a Japanese sports car loaded with the best technology, but that nevertheless doesn't even reach the fame of very recognized vehicles of the time as the Skyline GTR, the Supra, the NSX, or the RX-7. Knowing a little of the history of this vehicle and understanding that it is one of the best exponents of the time in terms of sportiness, the questions arise as to why it didn't work as intended, and why it isn't an icon today as other vehicles are. To answer these questions, we will first tell the story of this vehicle and explain why we say it's an exceptional car. To put ourselves in context, we must first appreciate the fact that Mitsubishi, back in the late 80s and early 90s, was betting on a sportier market. The Japanese brand that today is part of the alliance formed together with Renault and Nissan, at the time lived in a wave of optimism and an apparent unlimited financing, the result of the unprecedented bubble that the Japanese economy was experiencing. In this scenario, the company decided to contribute to this golden age of Japanese sports cars with an amazing flagship, the most technological sports car ever seen. Until then, the firm already had some experience, after having designed the Eclipse and the Lancer, and thus dared to manufacture this vehicle, with the aim of competing with the most popular cars in the sports environment. An interesting comment to make is the fact that the worldwide name was not 3000 GT. In Japan, it was sold under the name GTO, but in the US market and the European market, the name actually ended up being 3000 GT. The reason is rather simple. The brand feared the Western customers would relate the car to the Ferrari 250 GTO or the Pontiac GTO and end up rejecting it. In terms of comfort for both driver and passenger, we found a coupe with 2+2 seats and 4.6 meters long. This 2+2 configuration offered 2 comfortable front seats and 2 occasional rear seats. Thus, the vehicle had a comfortable space. The style of this Japanese car presented a typical design of the 90s, which undoubtedly highlighted the retractable headlights and silhouette that reminded perhaps the Ferrari 348. In the mid-90s, it received a redesign that unfortunately took away some charm. The headlights were replaced by fixed ones to adapt to new regulations. Something that usually generates confusion is the fact that this same vehicle also had a US version called Dodge Stealth, which was sold in dealerships of the American brand. It turns out that Mitsubishi had worked into cooperation with Chrysler. The resulting company was then called Diamond Star Motors, in which the Stealth was one of their first vehicles. The range of the 3000 GT was composed in the first instance by an Access version, whose engine was a naturally aspirated V6, which generates 255 horsepower, and which was equipped with front-wheel drive. The top-of-the-line variant, on the other hand, was equipped with a 3-liter V6 and twin turbochargers. One of the most important aspects of this Mitsubishi is undoubtedly its technological side. The car was conceived at the end of the 80s and was announced with a prototype that showed a really impressive technological equipment. The final versions undoubtedly followed this path, achieving very advanced levels even for today. They featured permanent all-wheel drive, adaptive suspension, 4-wheel steering, active aerodynamics, and an electronically controlled exhaust system. All these elements together can only be seen today in a very few high-end vehicles. To give an example, not even the current Nissan GTR itself has 4-wheel steering. Hence, Mitsubishi's impressive feat of putting all this equipment together in a sports car more than 30 years ago. The variant with these features was the top-of-the-line VR4. This was also the only version sold in Europe. It carried this V6, which produced 280 horsepower, accompanied by two 13G turbochargers, which were designed to provide greater performance and durability. This power was then sent 45% to the front axle and 55% to the rear axle. Although this was only an initial distribution, while driving, this percentage could vary electronically. One of the most important aspects of this vehicle was its active aerodynamics. It turns out that the front bumper had a lip that unfolded, and the rear spoiler was able to tilt 15 degrees from 50 miles per hour, seeking to increase downforce. It was added an adaptive suspension, which managed to change the character of the car between sporty and relaxed modes with sport and touring modes. Nor should we forget the exhaust butterfly valves, which were controlled by the driver. It's here where we begin to see the double edge of this sword that was its technological equipment, since this generated a load that had a negative impact on the car, making it heavy. It weighed almost 1,800 kilograms in some years, a very high figure for a sports car. However, must be recognized that despite this, it was able to do 0 to 60 miles per hour in less than 6 seconds, and to exceed 155 miles per hour. Many of the reports of the time complained about its weight, as well as its understeering behavior. Another point against it was the electronic failures, which were recurrent. All this consolidated the idea that the vehicle was unreliable, and if that weren't enough, so much technology ended up raising the price excessively, which made it become one of the most expensive Japanese cars at the time. Even so, in the early years, it can be said that sales were not bad. The GTO, before reaching its last and worst versions, presented a special edition for the Japanese market, the so-called MR or Mitsubishi Racing. This was a lightened version, a goal achieved by losing its four-wheel steering, active aerodynamics, and active exhaust. It was equipped with BBS wheels and a gearbox with shorter gear ratios. The weight was significantly reduced to 1,510 kilograms, or 3,330 pounds, making it faster than the RX-7 or the 300ZX. A convertible variant called the 3000GT Spider was offered between 1995 and 1996. This had a retractable hardtop, whose only benefit was that it counteracted the car's unequal weight distribution, now offering a perfect 50-50. Unfortunately, these variations were even more expensive, so they didn't sell much. And, thanks to this, although they suffered from stiffness problems and dispensed with the active aerodynamic system, today they are highly sought-after classics by collectors. Since its introduction, the sports car had undergone several evolutions, until it reached 320 horsepower. But over time, the brand was forced to dispense with much of its technology to reduce weight, such as the electronically controlled exhaust, the adaptive suspension, and finally, the active aerodynamics, which was replaced, in quotation marks of course, by a huge spoiler. Gradually, the popularity of the 3000 GT fell more and more, and so did its sales. Customers then opted for less technologically advanced, but more reliable and, in some cases, more economical options. Thus, 3000 GT's commercialization ended in 1999 in the European and US markets. On the other hand, the GTO continued to be sold for a while longer in Japan, although not much longer. 2001 was the last year in which it was possible to buy one of these sports cars.